was awakened by my brother screaming, and it was the type of a scream that it set me on edge. I knew something terrible had happened.
The earthquake hit when I was right at the top of the stairs, and I was able to run all the way down to the landing before the house collapsed.
He put the gun to the back of my head. The next thing this man says is, "I'm gonna kill you."
My mother and brother were lying on the floor, and they looked dead to me. There was a pool of blood next to them. The trip was just wonderful. My brother and I were just free to run on the boat and watch the dolphins, stand on the bowsprit. Each day we would lift anchor and we would go to another island and moor out, and then we would take a dinghy into the beaches and either swim, fish, walk the beaches. And it was just, it was like a dream. It was just beautiful. It was paradise. Captain Harvey was very, very handsome. He was tanned, he was very muscular. He was very shy, sort of standoffish almost, but always very pleasant. And his wife, Mary Dean, was very bubbly and very gracious. She did the cooking, and just a really, really nice young lady. I was awakened by my brother screaming, "Help, Daddy, help." And it was the type of a scream that it set me on edge. I knew something terrible had happened. And so I just lay in there, and it was probably 5 or 10 minutes, and I decided, well, I would leave my bunk and go out the door. And as I went out of my cabin, you went into the main cabin, which was the dining room and the galley, and my mother and brother were lying on the floor. My brother was dressed in his pajamas. My mother was in her regular clothing. And they looked dead to me. There was a pool of blood next to them. I think I went into shock because I didn't go and touch them, and I think I knew they were dead.
Julian and I flew down right after a New Year's Eve party in Philadelphia and got to Port-au-Prince about 8 in the morning on January 3rd. We were met by Geral, who's one of the leaders of this organization, and some friends of his. We were living with Geral and his family. After the adult literacy class was over, Julian and Geral and I went to our friend Framey's house to connect to the internet and send some emails to our parents and everyone saying we're doing okay. We just sat down. There were 5 of us in the house, Julian and I and Geral, and then 2 other Haitian men. We'd sat down to connect to the internet when the earthquake hit. When I first felt the earthquake, it was a really distinct vertical shock. So basically the house jumped. It was so distinct that I didn't think it was an earthquake. I'd been in a number of earthquakes before, and this was different than what I'd ever felt before. It was basically a single shock wave, so I thought that a truck had hit the building because I thought that Haiti wasn't an earthquake zone. The second shock wave was actually a horizontal shift. It slipped us backwards, quickly, distinctly, and then just sort of like a spring, a bang backwards. I looked up, saw Julian was already running towards the stairs, and quickly decided to follow. We were in the second story of the house, so there was one round of stairs that went straight down, and then there was a landing, and then there was another 4 or 5 stairs before you got to the ground floor. The third shockwave of the earthquake hit when I was right at the top of the stairs, and I was able to run all the way down to the landing before the house collapsed.
The way the federal regulations work is you have a 14-hour workday. 11 hours of that 14 hours can be driving. And after your 11 hours of driving, you have to take a 10-hour break. Park the truck, you can't move it. That's where you stay, inside in the cab of the truck. You have a bed behind the driver and passenger seat, and that's your home. I mean, it's really no different than your master bedroom at your house. It's just in a smaller compartment. I had washed my clothes, took my shower, ate, called home and talked there for about 45 minutes, and I was tired and had basically taken some sinus pills and said, I'm going to bed. And I hear a crash. Sit up in the bed, it startles me. All groggy out, I'm looking out the front window thinking, who just hit my truck? I got up on my knees to further investigate what was going on, and all of a sudden this man's coming through my window. Hand wrapped around my steering wheel with this funny grimace on his face. And then I realized, oh, he's got a gun. At the same time that I backed away from him, he fired the gun. He just shot me. This man just shot me. That was the biggest thought that went through my head when the bullet hit me was, I just got shot. And boy, does it hurt. The next thing this man says is, I'm gonna kill you.
I knew they were dead. I mean, I saw the blood, and they were in such a position that there was no movement. There was a pool of blood next to them. So I went past them, and I continued up the stairway to the top of the deck. And as I went up, I was facing the rear, and I saw blood on one of the cockpit seats, and I thought what was a knife in the shadows. And then I turned around and I looked forward, and I saw the captain up in the bow, and he was coming towards me, and he was sort of crouched, and it looked like he had a bucket or something in his hand. And I said, what is going on? What's happening? And he gruffly said, get down there, and pushed me down below into the cabin again. I was very trusting, and I thought that something bad had happened, and that he didn't want me to see what had happened. And I was trying to, think, where's my dad? Was he helping? Where's my sister? Seeing the captain, I trust and believe that everything was under control. So I went down and went back into my bunk, and I remained there, and I was listening, and it was very, very quiet. And he came into my cabin, opened the door, and he had a rifle in his hand, and he just stared at me. He didn't say anything. We just had eye contact, and then he backed out. And then the water started sloshing my mattress, and it began to float. And so I decided, well, the boat is sinking. I need to get out of here. I was rather queasy because the water was not clear, and I was really horrified that I was going to bump into my mother and brother because I knew I had to wade through the area where they were. And so I did it. I got out, and I just stood there, and Captain Harvey threw a line to me, which was for the dinghy, which was over the side of the boat. And he said, "Hold this." Well, as he threw it at me, I missed it. And he saw that I didn't have the line in my hand, so he dove over the boat. As I was standing on the deck and the captain dove overboard for the dinghy, it was obvious to me that the ship was going down. I remembered where the cork float was. I had to carry it over the sails, which were all billowing on deck and in the water floating, and I lifted it over the stanchions, put it in the water, and it was on top of the sail. Got into it, and then the bluebell was gone, but the rope was still connected to the raft, and I was just horrified that it was going to pull me under. And I was scrambling and scrambling to untie it, and eventually it let loose, and at that point, the boat was gone.
The third shockwave, when the house really started shaking and started to collapse, hit when I was about at the top of the stairs, and I made it to the landing before the house collapsed. I slipped and fell on the landing, I think. At least that's where I dropped the book that was in my hands, and my sandals fell off. And then ended up face down on the lower part of the staircase. It was pretty incoherent shaking and chaos. The house was coming down around us. The roof fell backwards, the walls fell in. The railing from the top part of the staircase fell over me. It was a steel railing, and when the roof fell on top of it, it was strong enough to keep the cement roof off of my head. My entire world was white. There was so much concrete and cement dust in the air that I couldn't see my hand 5 inches in front of my face. I was continuing to yell to Julian that I'm here, I'm stuck, I'm okay, I'm alive. I was face down on the stairs. They had white ceramic tiles on them that I was busy pulling off and trying to dig myself free because they were sharper, they were stronger than the cement. I was trapped basically from the waist down. There were big, heavy slabs of concrete on my legs. I didn't see any injuries. I was worried about losing circulation because I knew that having a house squashing your legs is pretty heavy. This was a big enough earthquake that there were a lot of other people trapped in houses too. I had to figure out how I could get myself out because help wasn't coming.
The next thing this man says is, "I'm gonna kill you." My feeling was just, don't. I have 2 kids. I have a family. At this point, I'm still on my knees, begging for my life. He just looked at me with that little grimace he had and says, lay down then and cooperate. If I didn't cooperate, I would die, and then who would find me? That's a thought that ran through my head this whole time, is if I die, how will my family find me? Will they know? I feel helpless. Never been helpless before. but feel helpless at this point. Heart racing, of course. He climbs the rest of the way in the truck. I'm laying on my stomach. And he calls his buddy inside the truck to sit in the driver's seat. He put the gun to the back of my head, and I'm feeling, oh crap. Am I gonna die? I thought about my boys, and thought about what they would think. I prayed. Just let them know that I love them. I turned my head sideways, and actually looked down the barrel of the gun.
I huddled in this raft, and it was very dark, and I was motionless and silent, and I just stayed that way and stayed that way. It finally dawned on me that there was something evil about Captain Harvey, and I was very fearful that he would find me. And I just waited and waited for morning to come, and that's when I was relieved. I could see then. It was a clear morning, and I looked around, and I couldn't see Harvey. I couldn't see anything but water. I was sitting in this cork raft, and the bottom was interlaced rope. I was always sitting in the water. I was always wet, and the only position I could be in was sitting. It was very uncomfortable. And the parrotfish started picking at me through the rope. As I was floating on the ocean in a white raft in white clothing, I blended in with the white caps, which really prohibited the search planes from spotting me. It was very discouraging because there was a red search plane that came so close to me I could almost reach up and grab it. I took my blouse off and I waved it, thinking, and I was screaming and thinking that, I'm here. Don't you see me? And I thought for sure it was so close to me that they spotted me, but they flew off, and it was very disheartening. I saw numerous ships on the horizon, and I would try to use my hands to paddle toward them. After one or two times, I realized that they were so far in the distance that it was absolutely impossible that I would, get to them, and I gave up hope that they wouldn't even see me. Then the night came, and the night before it was very, very cold. And I was dreading it because it was very uncomfortable sitting, and in the sitting position I couldn't really fall asleep, yet I did. I kept dozing, and I had a dream that I could see the blue lights of an airport, the landing strip, and I could see that my parents were waiting for me at the end of the landing strip. And so I was going to meet them. I jumped out of the raft, and jumping out of the raft awakened me. And fortunately, I hadn't let go, so I was still holding on to the cork, and I scrambled back in. I realized then that it was very dangerous to sleep because if I lost that raft, I was a goner.
Some of the bigger slabs of concrete that had fallen on me were supporting the rest of the house. So if they disturbed those, then the house would collapse on me. I sort of went into my engineering mindset of, this is the problem, these are the steps I need to take to solve it. These are the resources I have, this is the way that I can move forward. I need to get out of the building before it collapses on me. The plan to get me out basically evolved. Julian and Gerald picked up the smaller pieces that they could by hand as quickly as they could. It took them about half an hour to get my right leg free. That was the one that was a little higher on the stairs. I could feel that the weight was getting less on my leg, so I was excited about it. I was trying to pull myself forward into the little nook in front of me where there was more space, and I thought it would be safer if the house collapsed while they were moving pieces around. When they finally got my right leg free, they'd been speaking in Creole, and the other two men who were there were also chattering. And then all of a sudden, all of them were real quiet. And then Gerald reached through the cement blocks and felt my left leg. What he was doing was he was checking to see if that one was okay, because they'd seen that my right leg was cut in half.
He put the gun to the back of my head, and he asked me, how do you drive this? He can't drive it because of it being such an old truck. He had to fumble with it, and he had to drive it a certain way or you just wouldn't make the truck go. And I had to explain with the gun to the back of my head how to drive the truck. Once they had actually got the truck to moving, the man had looked at me and said, I'm going to tie you up now. Put your hands behind your back. And I felt him forcefully take my left hand and my right hand and put them together. And duct tape my legs, and then proceeded to duct tape my eyes. I hear these two men talking back and forth, saying, well, he's not from around here, so he doesn't know where we're at. He doesn't know anything. And I hear him, the man with the gun, he's right beside my head. And I hear him tell the guy driving, get off at this next exit. And then a guy touches me in the head again with the gun, and he says, we gotta make a stop. We stop in here, and if you make a move, you won't live. So you be real still. He says, this is just about business. All we want is your load. I'm thinking, well, take it. Take my truck. Let me go. I had 3 farm tractors on my trailer. They actually stated, that's what we want. We just want your load. We don't want you. We don't want your truck. We just want your load. Cooperate and you'll live. You fight, then you'll get 2 to the back of the head like the last one.
The second day, when it was dawn, it was cloudy, and I was very disappointed. It was very rough. I was very discouraged. It was uncomfortable. I was cold. And then I looked to my right, and there was a pod of pilot whales swimming next to me, and it was it brightened my day. It helped me get through the day. They were there, and I thought they were there to protect me and keep me company. On the third night, I was very exhausted. I was afraid to sleep because I didn't want to jump out of the raft or lose control of the raft. It was very, very dark. I did not think about my family and what had happened. And the reason I didn't think about them was I was having to deal with surviving on the raft. I wasn't thinking about how long it's been, or am I thirsty, or am I hungry. I just went and existed with what I had. The sun rose the next day, and thank goodness it was there, because I was very chilled and pretty much falling in and out of consciousness, just on and off most of the time. And I just sat there and just stared at the horizon, and I did see a ship again. And I thought, well, this one's going to pass right by. I didn't get my hopes up because I had seen so many ships previously. You know, I was pretty weak at that point, so it was like I wasn't really excited, or I didn't have the energy to start paddling or anything or waving. I just sat there.
It was basically like my leg was guillotined. The bones were cut clean through, the muscle was cut clean through. There was only about, I'd say, a quarter worth of tissue still holding my right foot onto my right leg. After Julian and Gerald got my right leg free, they decided that my left leg was too deeply buried to get it out without tools. The slabs of cement were too heavy to lift by hand. So Gerald went back home where he knew he had a pickaxe. After a couple seconds, they said, okay, well, can you move your right leg back, basically crawl backwards up the stairs out of a fairly small little hole. And eventually, well, real quickly, they got me out. I started to faint, you know how your vision sort of gets dark and you get tunnel vision. But then when Gerald and Wenson were telling me that I had to get on the motorcycle, they were going to bring me to a hospital, I realized that if I fainted, I wouldn't be able to sit up on a motorcycle. So I had to sort of hold on and stay conscious. This was probably the scariest part of the whole experience for me, because I could really see how the breadth of the devastation. Basically every house I saw had collapsed. There were a lot of people out really scared in the streets trying to figure out what had just happened, what was going on. When I first got there were maybe 100 other Haitians, all as badly injured as me, scared, milling around, not knowing what to do, hoping to get some medical care and some help. The Sri Lankan guys, they really did everything they could. They had some basic medical supplies. They poured some disinfectant all over my leg, and sent somebody off to get a fence post, where once the wet, dirty, gross-looking fence post returned, they strapped my leg to it in order to brace it and keep me from further injuring it. Dealing with the level of pain I was in at this point was the way I managed was really by trying to focus on anything else. I talked to really anybody who'd listen to me to try and keep my mind off what was happening to me. At one point, I asked for pain medication, and the guys just sort of chuckled. Half an hour later, he came back and offered me one of those little single-shot servings of alcohol of some variety. I didn't quite catch what it was. I figured alcohol is a blood thinner, so it probably wasn't a good idea for me. The first night was pretty long. Most of the time, I remember laying on my back and looking up at the stars. I could see Orion right above my head, and I watched him move from straight overhead to about that far. There were a lot of people by the end of the night. The whole courtyard was full, maybe 600 people. There were also a number of priests who were praying and leading people in song. Basically, we did all feel like the only way to get through that night was pulling together, that there wasn't help coming.
I hear the guy in the driver's seat get out. Hear the brakes set, and him get out. And at that point, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were dropping my trailer. They were going to hook to it with another truck, and they were going to be gone. They both climb back up in the truck, and he's got the gun back on me again, saying, "Don't you do nothing. Don't you make any moves." Then the truck starts moving again. And I can feel that the truck's not moving slow. It's getting faster and faster. Of course, the pain in my leg, I'm having to block it off, but it's still there, and every little bump hurts. And then I hear the brakes set, and actually, like, oh no, what's gonna happen? They said, "We're getting out here to talk to this guy. Don't make a move." And this other guy sees you moving in here, he's gonna come up in here and he's gonna kill you.
The man in the lookout spotted me with his binoculars, and at first thought that I was a fisherman, and then realized that a fisherman wouldn't be out in such a little boat, and then looked closer and decided that it was some kind of a person in a raft. The boat that rescued me was a Greek oil tanker named the Captain Theo, which is God in Greek. And I awakened in a cabin, and I had dry clothing on, and I was in a warm bunk. Felt wonderful. The next thing I remember was that I was being carried on deck, wrapped in a blanket, and put in a basket that was lowered from a helicopter. I was almost dead from exposure and dehydration. My heart rate was irregular. My kidneys weren't working. So I was near death. It was 4 or 5 days until that I was stabilized. And so the Coast Guard came into my room and they asked me questions. Captain Harvey's story was that there was a terrible storm. The main mast, snapped in half and pierced the cabin deck. There was an explosion and everything was on fire, and that everybody jumped over the boat because the boat was on fire, and that he couldn't get to anybody, and people were screaming and hollering, and there was blood all over the place. He told them that he didn't believe there were any survivors, that he saw everybody go overboard. That was the story that Captain Harvey told, and it was totally different than my story. There were people who doubted him in the beginning, but, how could they when he was the only survivor, until my story came about. After I was found, Captain Harvey checked into a motel and committed suicide. The Coast Guard's report determined that Captain Julian Harvey probably was in the act of murdering his wife, Mary, for insurance money. It was found out that he was very poor and owed money to many people, and that probably my father or my mother caught him in the act, and then he had to dispose of everyone else.
A number of the soldiers kept asking me if I was Heidi. They'd say, "Are you Heidi? Are you Heidi?" No, I'm not Heidi, but who is she? Can I go home with her? It turns out that they were asking if I was Haitian. I just wasn't listening for the right accent. I was expecting a Creole accent. And so once they established I was American, a major in the Sri Lankan army, Major Shujith, had me write down my email address and my phone number, and he was going to try and call my parents. He thought that if he could get a hold of anybody, somebody would come and get me. But he couldn't get through anywhere. There was no communications of any variety. So eventually, he gave up on that and decided that the only way he was going to get care for me was to go to Port-au-Prince himself and find somebody to take care of me. I don't really understand why. I mean, I was a stranger. He'd never met me before. I was just a little white girl. And he took it upon himself to go 10 miles all the way to Port-au-Prince to find an ambulance for me. I was pretty scared that I would have to stay another night. I wasn't quite sure how long my blood pressure would stay high enough that I would be conscious because I was losing so much blood. I don't know how he did it, but Major Shujith somehow sent a message that he was on his way back with an ambulance and that he'd be there in an hour. And sure enough, an hour later, he shows up with an ambulance and 2 stretchers. We flew into the Fort Lauderdale airport, and they had a train of ambulances and a couple of police cars waiting to give us an escort for the 45-minute drive back to Jackson Memorial. It was about 30 hours, I think, between when the earthquake happened and when I finally got painkillers. I know the earthquake was at 4:53 p.m. Tuesday, and I got to the airport. Our plane landed at 8:11 p.m. Wednesday. And then it was probably another hour before I actually got painkillers. Eventually, the lead doctor came up to me and told me that he wasn't going to be able to save my foot. It was pretty obvious where they were going to take my leg. The bones were cut clean through. It really would only have taken a pair of scissors and a minute or two to take the rest of my foot off.
When they parked the truck, they said, "We're getting out here to talk to this guy. Don't make a move." This other guy sees you moving in here. He's gonna come up in here and he's gonna kill you. They both climbed out of the truck. One out the passenger side and one out the driver's side. It was after laying there for 15 minutes or so and actually not wanting to breathe, not wanting to make any kind of movement, that I actually started hearing the other things around me and realizing that, okay, well, nobody's around but me. I worked the duct tape off my eyes and positioned myself to where I could see out the windows. And then I looked to my right and I see another truck. And I said, oh, I know where I'm at. I'm right back where I began. fumbled around in the front, leaned over into the front, and found my cell phone and dialed 911. And I told the operator that I had been shot and hijacked. She stayed on the phone with me until the ambulance actually got there. I remember feeling scared because now I'm dealing with it. I get the aftershock. The aftershock of, oh no, this just happened to me. And it's not a dream, it did happen. To this day, I have trouble sleeping in my truck. I can honestly say 2 years later, I'll wake up with a pin dropping on the floor. I don't sleep hard anymore. And I survived for my family and my kids. That's why I believe I survived, that I have something better and a bigger purpose to accomplish before it's my time.
Losing my foot seemed pretty minor compared to being alive. That there are a lot of ways I could have died in those 2 days, and there are a lot of ways that the stars aligned for me that I got out. A lot of people stepped forward and did really good things to save my life. It's been really important to me to figure out a way to really turn bad into good, to make a difference in the lives of the people who saved mine. So what my family and I did was we started a foundation called Christa's Angels. The aim of this is to really help the guys who saved my life rebuild theirs. We've raised enough money to rebuild the school that Julian and I were working in. So it's a slow process, but I think it's really important that these are family now. These are guys who saved my life, so we need to provide for them. I survived because people stepped forward and did the right thing. I'm really impressed at how good, how kind people were in such a terrible situation.
Everyone was told, don't talk to Tere about this, just, pretend like it didn't happen. She's just supposed to be a normal child. Just go on with your life and just don't mention anything to her. So everyone did that. And it was very hard for me. I was known as brave little Tere Jo, and so I had to live that. I struggled most of my life. I had ups and downs, and it was a result of holding in a lot of the trauma I experienced as a young child, so I made wrong decisions, I made mistakes, but I moved on, and now I'm at the point in my life where I should be. I'm at a good point, and so I'm willing to share this with people so that they can realize that you can go on. I survived because I was put in a situation that I dealt with. If you're put in a situation that is challenging, you need to go with it. If you fight it, you're not going to make it. And so you have to adapt to whatever the circumstances are and go with the flow. And I think that anybody that does this can survive.